revolution, well, you know.
Welcome, everyone. You've made it through 4 days. Only 2 days left. I know it's a long haul, and you guys are the hardcore folks who are still here, so congratulations. Well, thank you, Stephen, for that introduction. It certainly is a good feeling to be back here on center stage at TDWI after probably a 5-year hiatus. And it's good to be mingling with the crowds and the BI professionals and data analytics professionals that are here for this conference. So those of you who know TDWI well recognize that this conference is a bit of a departure for the company. The new analytics experience has a new look and feel, a new format, new instructors. And in its way, TDWI is keeping pace with the changes that are sweeping across our industry that you're probably feeling as well. And those changes are emblematic of the changes that you have to make to your team and your organization. And those changes are really the focus of this presentation today. Because as you heard in the key song here as I came up, there is a revolution going on. So the objectives of my presentation today, in the next 40 minutes or so, I'd like you to leave with these 3 key learnings. 1, the data world has changed. There is a revolution going on that's fundamentally challenging our assumptions about how you design and build a data analytics architecture and how you organize a BI team. Secondly, BI is one of many players. It's no longer the only game in town. If you want to turn data into insights into action, there's a lot of players out there. And some of us may actually feel a little bit marginalized as the center of attention, and indeed some of the funding has shifted from us to other parts of the business. But nonetheless, my third point that I want to leave you today with is that you still have a critical role to play. Given your experience, you're the people who can lead the charge into this new world. You can create a shared vision among all these players of how you're going to build this new environment, this new ecosystem, and build a new analytics center of excellence, where multiple constituents play a critical role in turning data into insights and action. So we'll come back to these at the end and see if we've achieved these objectives. So let's talk about revolution for a second. There have been many revolutions in the course of human history. Perhaps one of the biggest happened in the 16th century when a Polish humanist named Nicholas Copernicus overturned the prevailing notion of what laid at the center of the universe that had been in sway since the early Roman Republic, where guys like Ptolemy and Aristotle postulated that the Earth was at the center of the universe. Indeed, their observations seemed to confirm that. When they looked up into the sky at night, the stars and the planets and the sun seemed to circle the Earth. And when they looked down at their feet, they felt a solid mass that didn't move, that was stationary. Or at least most of their observations. They did notice that some planets, at some times during the year, actually seemed to slow down, stop, and move in reverse. And the way they explained this retrograde motion was that every planet had 2 orbits, one a deferent orbit and one an epicycle, which you see depicted here with the little hitch. And this notion and that depiction that you see held sway until 1543, when Nicholas Copernicus published his treatise called On the Revolution of Celestial Spheres. And I like that title, On the Revolution. Not just revolution of planets orbiting an Earth, but really a revolution in thinking. And he and the folks who followed him, like Johannes Kepler, Galileo Galilei, and finally Sir Isaac Newton, triggered a whole new way of thinking about the universe and how it worked. And in fact, Copernicus was the person who actually kicked off the scientific revolution. Now, we've had fundamental assumptions in BI about how we deliver data and turn it into insights and action. Let's call this BI centrism. And that has held sway for the last 15 years or so, from 1995, when TDWI was born, until about 5 years ago, when people from the open source community in Silicon Valley, led by folks like Cloudera and Hortonworks and Tableau, ushered in a whole new era. But until that time, if you wanted to turn data into insight and action, or create reports, or monitor processes with dashboards and scorecards, or perform some ad hoc analysis, do exploration or mining, there was one game in town, and there was one way to do it, and that was to build a data warehouse. And to do that, you would consult Bill Inman or Ralph Kimball, the fathers of our industry. You'd read their books, go to their events, talk to their proteges. And this held sway, as I said, until about 2010, when this new era of big data analytics came in with full force, like a hurricane hitting the coast of Florida. And nothing has been the same since. So no longer is business intelligence the only intelligence out there. There are multiple intelligences. And in my framework of the future, there are four. Business intelligence is that framework we use to deliver certified, trustworthy data to casual users in the form of reports and dashboards populated with data from a data warehouse. We also have, on the bottom, analytics intelligence. This is the realm where we're delivering ad hoc analysis, exploration, discovery to business analysts who are answering questions that cannot be anticipated in advance, where we can't go out and gather requirements to serve them in advance. On the right, we have continuous intelligence, where our organizations want to move at the speed of thought. And we have large volumes of data that we cannot even persist anymore because they're too big, so we have to analyze them on the fly using new technologies like complex event processing and streaming analytics. On the left side, we have content intelligence, where we're finally wrapping our arms around this whole new world of unstructured and semi-structured data that some say constitute 80% of the data that we could use to drive the business. So there's multiple intelligences, and each of these have different architectures, different design models, different tools, serving slightly different users, but all aiming towards the same end, to turn data into insight and action and do all those functions pictured in the middle circle there. Now, if we drive down a layer and look at the conceptual architecture, you see here that it's not the traditional data warehousing architecture with a big data warehouse in the middle, ETL on the left, and BI tools on the right. Now we have a lot more entities that we have to mix and match and somehow stitch together into a new world order that's going to drive much greater value to the business with our data. On the left in that gray box are our source systems with relational data that we've traditionally pushed into our data warehouse, but now on the bottom, non-relational data, social media data, log data, sensor data, images, files, emails, documents. And for the most part, we're pushing these into a staging area that some people now call an enterprise data hub or a data lake. And a lot of companies now are using this new tool called Hadoop, or the Hadoop distributed file system, to store that data or to support that staging area, because the costs of loading any type of data in there are so low. Now, truth be told, if you're an Inmanite and you know your Inman Bible well, you realize that he actually proposed a staging area to store and persist raw atomic data that could be repurposed when future needs arose without having to go back to the source system. And from that staging area, you move data into a third normal form data warehouse, and from there into dimensional data marts. The big data community doesn't know in proposing these new Hadoop enterprise data hubs that they're actually implementing Inman's model. But guess what? Don't tell them. They'll probably be offended. In the middle, in the pink, we have our query processing systems. At the top is the continuous intelligence, where we're streaming data in real time, using rules to parse together events and trigger alerts into our dashboards that are manned by operational users. In the middle is our business intelligence environment, our data warehouse, if you will, which you can see straddles these two worlds of casual users, power users, what I call top-down and bottom-up BI. Primarily used to support the core applications, analytic applications running in business units, the reports and the dashboards, the bread and butter of data management that run our businesses today. And the half of that below that dotted line is really for root cause analysis when things go wrong and our report shows something that we need to dig into. And below that business intelligence box is the analytics intelligence area. And this is a discovery zone, as some people call it, where analysts can play in the corporate environment, where they can mash up their own data, which they pull from external sources or other places inside our organization, and mash it up with data warehouse data without interfering with any of our core data warehousing processes. Indeed, this analytics intelligence is one of the more revolutionary things, because we're finally giving business analysts their due. We've shut them out of our environment for so many years because we're afraid of the queries that they run against our warehouse, where they're doing these big dumps into Excel, bog down performance for everyone else. And the only thing they do, at least from our perspective, with that data is to create these data silos, or what I call spread marks, that undermine the information consistency that we work so hard in this top-down world to create and preserve. We're now giving them a full seat at the data table. The blue boxes really represent an abstraction layer. At the top, a semantic layer for casual users, so they can use corporate data objects without having to know where they're located or how to access them. It also gives administrators a lot of freedom to move data to the appropriate platform that's best suited for that workload. And these platforms are evolving so quickly, you want to change where things are running, bring in new platforms, but you don't want to disrupt downstream applications and users. The data directory is kind of like a semantic layer, but for business analysts, so that they can find their way around the data warehouse and other corporate databases easily, because most can't find their way. They need a map. The only map they have now is the tribal knowledge that exists in the heads of one or two super analysts, and they're dependent on those folks to guide them through the database structures. But we need to take that knowledge, document it, and expose it, and allow business analysts to collaborate around that map and expand it with new data structures that they can tag and rate and comment using social media techniques. And in that way, build up a whole new vocabulary, a whole new governance structure from the bottom up. Call it grassroots data governance, if you will. In the green boxes, this at the top are standard corporate dashboards and reports serving casual users. And in the bottom, we've had an explosion of new self-service tools, self-service reporting tools, self-service visualization tools, self-service analytics tools, and data integration tools to support the needs of the power users. In fact, this decade is the decade of the power user, or the business analyst and data scientist. We're finally coming out with tools and technologies that are geared specifically to them. So we've taken a look at this revolution. We've analyzed the new intelligences. We've looked at the architecture. Let's look at the new organization. Again, BI is no longer in the center. There are many players. And who are these players? At the top, the advanced analytics team playing around with algorithms and Hadoop to find that data needle in the haystack that's worth millions of dollars to your company. To the left, you've got the business unit heads, along with their business analysts, who I like to call human data warehouses, because they're building up data silos in spreadsheets and access databases traditionally. And their managers, those functional analytical managers, who are holding more and more power inside organizations as they're getting more budget to drive data and insights locally instead of centrally. To the left, infrastructure administrators, folks, are IT partners who are building out Hadoop clusters for the entire organization. Minor players include chief data officers who are managing data governance programs, business unit CIOs who are closer to different parts of the business with technology, security and audit professionals, MDM professionals with MDM hubs. All of these folks have a stake in the new world order of data. All of these are driving to turn data into insights and action. All of these folks need to be brought together to create a shared vision in a shared organization, which I call a business analytics center of excellence. And I believe it's the role of the BI team and the BI leader to foster this integration of people and technology. So we've looked at the revolution, we've looked at the new architecture, we've looked at the new organization. We now have to ask, what's driving all of this? Why now? We don't have to look too far, just down to the infrastructure. The gains that we've seen in the price performance of the fundamental components driving our hardware have grown exponentially. The CPUs, the disks, the memory have made these incredible gains that have created a revolution of innovation to the point where hardware now is able to allow us to imagine things that we can now do. We can do things now that we never thought we could do, 5 years ago even. In our space, the changes have been dramatic. In 1993, a pharmacy chain built a data warehouse that had 10 Pentium CPUs driving it with 2 gigabytes of RAM, 1 terabyte of disk, and it cost them $1.6 million. Today, you can get, in 2009, you could buy a desktop with more power, more memory, and just about as much disk for $600. Today, you can buy the same thing on a cell phone for $60 a month. In fact, you could feasibly put a data warehouse on a smartphone. One of my clients has a very effective data warehouse. It's in the real estate industry. Not a lot of data, actually less than 50 gigabytes, would fit on this phone. So the underlying technology hardware has fomented a revolution, not just in BI, but in many other spheres of the information economy. And when we apply these new technological changes at the infrastructure level to analytics, the changes have been dramatic. If you compare the old world of BI to the potential new world that you can create in your own organizations, the contrast is stark. It's like as stark as going from monochrome to Kodachrome, from black and white TVs to color TVs. And what does that transformation look like? We've gone from an enterprise data warehouse to a big data ecosystem, which we depicted conceptually a few slides ago. We've gone from IT-driven environments to self-service-driven environments, from reactive BI to proactive BI, from slow response times and slow delivery times to fast response times and fast delivery times, from static interfaces to interactive interfaces, from hard-to-use tools to easy-to-use, intuitive tools that hardly require any training, from tabular views of data to visualization, from reporting to analytics, desktop to mobile, on-premise to cloud, from transactional data only to transactional and multi-structured data. And finally, if this is all going to happen, from a business versus IT mentality to a business and IT. We can no longer have these two worlds struggling and competing with each other if we're going to usher in this new world. They have to work collaboratively together. Advances in technology have been a straight line, but there's something else going on here that's cyclical in nature. There is a power struggle for control of data in your organization. And I characterize this power struggle with these terms top-down and bottom-up, which I've hinted at earlier. Well, let me describe these two worlds. Top-down BI is traditionally driven by the IT department. It's focused on standards that can be applied across the organization so things can be scalable, secure, and resilient. Designed primarily to meet the needs of casual users who need to monitor core processes for which they're being held accountable, answer known questions that can be instrumented with metrics or KPIs and displayed graphically in dashboards, using trustworthy data populated from a data warehouse. In short, it's a governed world. And that's the world I think most of you have been in. And it's an important world. Organizations cannot survive without a governed data world. But there's another part of our organization that I call bottom-up BI, and they're very different. They're not driven by IT, they're driven by the business units. They're not focused on standards, they're focused on speed and agility and meeting the needs of the customers at the point of interaction. They're not necessarily focused just on casual users, but more on power users, though business analysts and data scientists. They don't monitor processes, they look for new insights. They need to answer new questions that you can't anticipate, that you cannot go out and gather requirements and build something to support. They not only use certified, trustworthy data from the warehouse, they use any data, anywhere that they can get their hands on to answer these questions. In short, this is an ungoverned world. And your business needs this world just as much as it needs the governed world. And in fact, the ungoverned world is the leading edge of requirements for the governed world. These are flip sides of the same coin. These people are allies, not enemies. Unfortunately, most of the clients that I go into, these two worlds are worlds apart and antagonistic to each other. And your job, because the onus falls on you, is to bring these two worlds together. Now, I said this was a power struggle that's cyclical. Every 10 years, like clockwork, the pendulum has shifted and who has the power in the organization. In the 80s, top-down world was preeminent. Mainframe, mini-computer-based reports. In the 90s, that shifted to the business units. The industry came out with all these desktop reporting and OLAP tools designed for power users to do analysis on corporate data. That shifted back again in 2000 to the casual users, where these vendors like Business Objects and Cognos and Hyperion and MicroStrategy realized that power users were only 20% of the market at best. And they might as well start building reports and dashboards to meet the needs of the 80% of the market. And like clockwork, in 2010, the world of big data and analytics got ushered in. And it's interesting. It's 2015 right now. We're right in the middle of this next cycle. And for the first time, not surprisingly, this year I've heard one word from that big data community that I've never heard in the last 5 years. Can you imagine what that word is? Governance. There's now a move in the big data analytics community to think about how to govern this wild, wild west of data. So the pendulum is swinging back again. And soon your time in the sun will come. Now, the goal really is not to have this pendulum swing so far in each direction. It's really to have some stability, not to eliminate one or the other through preeminence or dominance or superiority, but to have both and working together synergistically. That's hard to do. So what's your role in this new world order? What's the role of the BI team? It's changed. And in some ways, it's gotten simple. Because guess what? When we were the only game in town, we were asked to do too much. People expected things out of the data warehouse that it really wasn't designed to do. So in some ways, this new world order has been a service to us. We can now focus on what we do best. And to me, it's three things. One, deliver certified, trustworthy data, which means build and manage that data warehouse. However you implement it, that repository of clean, integrated data that the business needs to make decisions. We need to create and maintain that data dictionary or data catalog for the business analysts so they can figure out where to go to grab those data sets to do their analyses. And we need to build these analytical sandboxes in our new ecosystem where they can play undisturbed and collaborate with each other instead of working in isolation, so they don't reinvent the wheel each time they do an analysis, which they're apt to do. And most importantly, so we can watch what they're doing. Because I said earlier, what they do, even though it seems threatening to us because it's creating spread marks, it's the instantiation of the next generation of requirements for our warehouse and our reports. What they're doing today is what we need to build into our warehouse and reports and dashboards tomorrow. Secondly, you need to do a better job of supporting business analysts. We've locked the door on them for decades. It's time we open the door up and make them full-fledged players in this data world. And of course, they're not waiting for us. They're doing their own thing with their own tools and their own budgets. And if we don't jump on board and get in front of this freight train, it's going to run us over. So what do we need to do to help them out? We need to train them to use self-service BI tools. This seems like a contradiction in terms. But to implement self-service, and I believe self-service is really only for power users, requires a lot of hand-holding. And that's kind of counterintuitive. Self-service requires a lot of hand-holding. It's the only way it works. These folks don't really know how to use these new tools unless someone spends one-on-one time with them, in most cases, especially the newer analysts, showing them how to do it. That takes a lot of time. And ideally, it takes someone sitting side by side with them day in, day out, not a one-shot training course. We also need to help them navigate the data warehouse by providing that data dictionary or data catalog and helping them create that grassroots governance around that catalog. We also need to convert their ad hoc reports into production reports so they don't get tempted to become full-time report managers, so they can focus on doing what they are hired to do, analysis, not running scheduled reports on a regular basis. But this requires that we have someone sitting next to them who's watching what they're doing, helping them, assisting them, and taking their output and turning it into production reports that run a scalable, secure, resilient platform that's managed by the corporate BI team. This fundamentally calls for a new organization, which I believe is federated in nature, where you have people embedded and sitting in the business units, working side by side with these analysts, who are matrixed back to the corporate BI team. Finally, we need to do a better job of supporting business unit report developers. Who are these folks? Well, these folks usually have the analyst title. They're the people the business units hired after the corporate took all of their BI professionals and put them on a corporate team. They hired them back, give them an analyst title, and they're basically surrogate or glorified report developers who are using whatever low-cost tools are lying around, typically Microsoft platform, taking data extracts from the warehouse and building reports that that local business unit needs. And that's fine. Those are really members of your BI team. They're the eyes and ears of your team in the business units. They're critical to your success. I call these folks report analysts. But what they've built, typically in the business units, are very brittle. It's like being held together with duct tape and baling wire. If they leave, the thing falls apart. If the company upgrades to a new version of Microsoft Exchange, the thing breaks. They're brittle and fragile report environments that gradually, over time, need to be replaced by something more industrial that only the corporate BI team, I believe, can deliver in conjunction with these report developers. So that's the BI team, those three major roles. I hope you agree with me. If you don't, I'd love to hear from you. But a BI team is only good as its leader. So we need strong business intelligence analytics leaders, and their roles have changed too. I think they fundamentally need to focus on doing 4 things. First, they need to create this business analytics center of excellence that I talked about earlier. They need to figure out who all those players are. Identify them, take them out to lunch, start to build relationships. Pull them together into some ad hoc committees to create that shared vision and infrastructure for the future. And facilitate handoffs between all these key players in this new environment, which is depicted in that framework in the right, which is my vision for a Business Analytics Center of Excellence, which would take me another 15 minutes to go through. Secondly, I believe they need to create a federated BI organization to support this new Business Analytics Center of Excellence. And the key, I've already hinted at, you need to find the surrogate BI players in every business unit and every department and make them an extension of your team through a matrixed reporting relationship where you provide support and training and performance reviews, and they become your eyes and ears in the business unit. They are the ones who sit side by side with the analysts and help train them to use those self-service BI tools, train them how to navigate through the data warehouse. You need a steering committee, I call it BI Council, of business people, these analysts and their managers, to be your board of directors, to make this a truly business-owned, business-driven center of excellence. This is kind of like putting the fox in the hen house. Why would you put these analysts who have worked so hard over the years to undermine the data consistency in your warehouse and put them in charge in a review and authoritative position on a council? But that's exactly what you need to do. You need to get their buy-in by making them part of the solution, not part of the problem. And finally, you need to teach your team not to be order takers. That is the lowest value that you can offer to your organization. If you have requirements analysts who go in and ask users what they need and take notes, it's a symptom of a problem. I think you're going in the wrong direction. What you need are requirements analysts, which I call relationship managers, who know the business so well, who sit in the business each day, who sit on their strategy meetings, and can anticipate their needs before the business even asks for it, who can take their knowledge of the business, their knowledge of the data, and their knowledge of the tools and technology and say, hey, guys, I've been listening to you for the last month. I think I have a solution to what you've been talking about. If you can do that, you change the whole relationship around from one of order taking to one of strategic partner. And if you're a strategic partner to the business, you're going to be hugely successful. There's going to be an incredible demand for your services. And then you have a different problem, which is the curse of success. But I'd rather you have that than have your budget cut and be completely marginalized or even outsourced or offshored. Third, the BI leader needs to be the ultimate data salesperson. They need to be stronger in sales and marketing and education than they are in technology. They have to have the technology credentials, don't get me wrong. That's the ticket to play the game. If you want to win the game, you have to master all the soft skills. You have to brand and market your program. You have to sell up to your sponsors, down to the workers, and across to business unit managers who tend to be territorial when it comes to data. You need to showcase your successes by holding internal conferences and have the business people themselves speak of the great things they've done with your tools and your data. And finally, the BI leader needs to spearhead global data governance initiatives. We've figured out how to do data governance in the data warehousing world. You can't have a data warehouse without some form of data governance. Doing this on a corporate-wide basis is hard. The company could use our experience and our skills in helping apply data governance across the enterprise. So another way to say all this, we've looked at The teams, we've looked at the leadership required to survive and indeed thrive in this new world. Ultimately, your goal is to foster convergence of technology and teams that are pretty much represented in these three circles: business intelligence, advanced analytics, and data management. And your goal is to bring them together, foster that shared vision, shared infrastructure. But you may ask, how the heck do we do this? This is not easy. How do we evolve from where we are today to where we need to go? Well, this is the methodology I use when I work with clients to help them go from the old world to the new world. I think it's important to look at 5 different architectures, because if you can master these architectures, you can succeed in the new game. The first is business architecture. Do you run BI like a business? Do you treat your users like customers and your reports like products? And do you track your market share against non-standard reports and output? Probably the hardest architecture to master is the organizational one. Do you have the right people in the right roles doing the right things, reporting to the right managers? Analytical architecture. Do we have the right tools? Have we given the right tools to the right users with the right level of support that they can do their jobs efficiently and effectively? Data architecture. Do we have the right platforms running the right workloads with the optimal performance at the lowest cost? And finally, governance architecture. Do we have a common data vocabulary in the business? Or do we have a Tower of Babel, where business users talk to each other but don't hear what anyone is saying? Mastering these 5 architectures will go a long way to helping you thrive in this new revolutionary world order. So in summary, these are the things I hope to accomplish this morning to convince you that the data world has changed, that we have experiencing a revolution in the way we design and develop our architectures and organize our teams. You're no longer the only player in town. And although you may feel adrift, slightly confused, as you see the limelight and the funding move to other parts of the organization who are delivering data and insights to users, don't worry, because the third bullet, I think BI still has a critical role to play. You guys have the experience, and I think you can create that vision, and if you exhibit the leadership required, you can help bring the organization to a better place instead of having it kind of fall apart into many different pieces and fiefdoms. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I wish you good luck in your classes this week. And if you have any questions for me, if there's anything I can do or Eckerson Group can do to help you, please don't hesitate to call or ask. Thank you very much.